Faster than writing to a letter forum, more thoughtful than angry clickbait, able to discuss the world's first superhero in comics, film, TV, and more, it's the Supermaniacs, and we have a fun show planned today. We're going to be discussing Superman 2, both cuts of the movie, the theatrical cut as well as the Richard Donner cut, and I'm looking forward to getting into this topic with Mike. Mike, how are you doing today?
I'm doing swell. How are you doing?
I am doing great. I just watched both cuts of this film, so I feel the most informed I've ever been and ready and prepared to talk about it. So
I know the feeling.
Yeah, you're saying that you just watched both of them yesterday, so
Yes, and it was the first time I've seen the theatrical in a very long time.
So it should be fresh, but yeah, it's also very relevant now as we are just weeks away from the return of Superman to the big screen with James Gunn's film coming out July 11th.
We're very close. We're much closer than I expected, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
We're much closer than I thought we would be, where we've still have only had one trailer. So
It's like 1.5, probably at best.
As much as I see like some fans complaining about why isn't there more marketing, it's kind of like Warner Brothers doesn't really need to do a lot of marketing. Like the brand awareness for this movie is already huge.
Well, not only that, not only does it save them a little money, but it also adds a bit of mystery to whatever the movie really is about, which I find far more exciting than knowing anything about it.
Yeah, I miss the days of being able to go into these movies a lot more blind than we can get away with these days. If I can get some big surprises in the theater in July, I hope that there's some big things saved until then. But we're probably going to get a lot more marketing in the next few weeks.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it, especially with the figures are going to eventually start coming out. And then, there's the prequel novel that we talked about. And there's going to be a lot of stuff that's going to be a heavy push towards please, for the love of God, watch our movie type thing. But the fact that everybody I've talked to at some point has pretty much said Superman's one of the things they're looking forward to the most this year. Because I was talking to somebody about Thunderbolts, and they're just like, look, I like Thunderbolts, but I can't wait for Superman type of thing.
Yeah, and I haven't seen Thunderbolts yet, but I've been hearing good things. So.
It's got some Superman DNA in it. I can't say why without spoiling something. But
I think I know why, but yeah, that kind of makes me curious to see the MCU take on some of those Marvel versions of Superman type characters. But I should remind people that just a week ago we talked about the 1978 film Superman the movie that gave us Christopher Reeve as Superman, Gene Hackman as Luthor. The first, I guess there's now 2 Richard Donner directed Superman movies. The one was in production until 2006 before it was ever released.
It took a long time for them to come out with that version.
But the 2 movies, they pair together really quite well, though. Like the Donner cut and the original Donner film. If you are going to marathon the 2 of those back to back, that's definitely the way to do it. Because if you go from the original movie to the theatrical cut of the sequel, you get that recap sequence of the entire first movie where they kind of give you the previously on Superman.
It's 8 minutes long.
But I kind of get it. I wasn't alive in 1981, but I know very few people had VCRs back then, so you probably hadn't seen the movie unless you had either caught it on TV or you saw it in the theater during its first run. So people probably appreciated it more at the time.
That's true. But I was sitting there and I was just because I watched this with my girlfriend and she was messing around with something at the same time, and she kept looking up, going, "Oh, it's still going," type thing. And I'm sitting there and I'm just and also for people who don't know as well, Superman 2 doesn't have John Williams, the theatrical cut. It has a guy named Ken Thorne, I think is his name. And it's because apparently Richard Lester and John Williams didn't get along at all. They apparently had an argument just before they were going to start using him. And he's like, I can't work with this dude, and just fucking left. It was so funny.
But a lot of the talent left with Donner. A lot of the the people who worked on Superman the movie. Stuart Baird, the editor, he left. The guy who polished Mario Puzo's script, that I can't think of off the top of my head right now, but the writer that worked with Donner on the first movie also left.
Yeah, it's crazy how many people left this film or just didn't come back for the reshoots they did. Because there's a ton of reshoots. I forgot how different a lot of the movie is because of the reshoots.
Yeah, and so the reason why there is so much material reshot is the union rules. If I remember correctly, you had to direct 75% of the footage yourself in order to be credited as the director.
Yes.
And so when Donner didn't get the invite to come back, the Salkins that were producing the movies, they did not want Donner back on the second movie to finish it off. Richard Lester was required to reshoot enough material so that there was only 25% or less Donner shot footage in the final cut of the movie. So with the Donner cut, it's the opposite, where there's still a lot of the Richard Lester stuff is still in the Donner cut, but I guess they reduced it to 25% of the movie. So for that, Richard Donner gets full credit.
And it makes sense because they can't exactly reshoot it kind of thing to get the whole thing done, because it's not like the Snyder cut. The Richard Donner cut is the original Snyder cut essentially, which is that somebody left and everybody had to reshoot everything. The only difference is that Snyder was allowed to reshoot stuff for his, because everybody is very much alive, and it wasn't that much I think in time between the cuts. So it was easier to pull off than what we ended up here with.
Yeah, and it's also interesting, like how much of the footage, they kind of work well together, but then like there's so much of it that does kind of like stand out as just kind of odd. Like they had different styles. Richard Lester leaned a lot more into the slapstick comedy. So, and you still get remnants of that in the Donner cut. Like you still see like the guy on the roller skates when Zod is using the super breath in downtown Metropolis during the big fight. Like
they just don't linger on the guy to really make the joke stay.
Yeah, but they cut out like the ice cream getting blown out of the ice cream cone, and like
and the guy on the phone who's just like, he falls down in the booth and he's still talking the whole time.
Yeah, a lot of the more gaggy type things. The when Superman lands on a car and then the woman in the car says, "You're gonna pay for that," and
there's another one that I forgot about, which is that there's a lot of ad libs too, and by that, or not ad libs, there's ADR. There's a lot of ADR.
Oh yeah,
throughout the film. One of them you just mentioned. The other one is the one where when Lex Luthor asks for his Liberace record back, and the guy in the Donner cut just says "tonight," like with a question mark, whereas in the Lester cut, he goes, "There's a scratch on it, by the way," just randomly.
Yeah, they had the ADR on him saying that it was scratched just because Richard Lester needed like he needed like something goofy to happen every 5 minutes.
Yeah, he needed a joke every 20 seconds. There is one thing that happens that is a joke in the Lester cut that isn't used in the Donner cut, but there's still a remnant of it, which is the taxi guy hitting Clark with his taxi.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say there's a remnant of it is because when the guy hits Clark, he leaves this giant indention in the front of the cab. And I didn't realize this until I was rewatching it, which is when Superman starts his fight with General Zod. When the cab guy says, "Oh, this is going to be good," it's the exact same cab guy, and the giant dent is still on his cab when he first pops up in that sequence.
I did not realize that was the same guy, but the other weird Richard Lester edition that made it into the Donner cut is when Lois is obsessed with oranges and orange juice, just freshly squeezed orange juice in the movie.
Yes,
that's a scene in the Daily Planet when she's loading up the ashtray with cigarettes, talking about like, "Oh, I got to be healthy. I got to like have all this freshly squeezed OJ to stay healthy," and then in the Donner cut, they mention orange juice a couple of times, like at Niagara Falls, and then again in the Fortress. But that original scene is missing.
It's really funny because those scenes aren't really, or the second one at least, the Fortress one, I don't think is even used in the Lester cut.
Well, I'm talking about like the scene when he pops the champagne bottle
Well, that's what I
with his
mean. I
hand.
don't think he uses that line in the Lester cut.
Oh,
I
about
think I
avoiding
think I
the
think they're just
orange juice.
eating. Yeah, I think they're just already eating in the Lester cut. I think it cuts to them eating right
Mm.
away, and so he doesn't open the champagne. I think he just starts pouring it, and then that's it. Whereas in the Donner cut, he makes the joke and then starts pouring it.
But we both grew up, I assume, I guess, on the theatrical cut of the movie, since that was the common home video version until around 2006, and that was part of
Yeah,
like the Superman Returns marketing. That's the reason why this project got finished, because they were having to make a deal with the Marlon Brando estate to use the Jor-El footage in Superman Returns.
yeah. So a lot of people don't know this is that one of the reasons why this happened originally was, or not this specifically, but Donner leaving Superman 2 is that Marlon Brando had a super generous deal when it came to being in Superman the movie. One of them is that he got like 11% of 11% of the gross or something like that. Something gigantic, which is like honestly kind of unheard of, as well as like a giant chunk of change. But what happened was that he sued them because he's like, you guys didn't pay me that amount, as well as like he doesn't want them to use their footage if they're not going to pay him. So they settled out of court, and then they're like, well, we can't use the Marlon Brando footage anymore. Why don't we just make it the mom instead? But Donner is like, I have a very specific vision, and I want control, not financially, because he's like, I don't give a shit about the money. I want creative control over this movie, and Marlon Brando is a huge part of his vision for what the story was going on. Especially, with a lot of the lines, some of the most famous lines in the movies are from some of this footage, and so so that was part of what caused the argument for getting rid of him, and so yeah, so we always knew about the theatrical cut because there was why would we know there was anything else kind of thing, like there's no reason to. There's whole parts of my mind that still remember very specific sequences of the theatrical cut that even when I watch the Richard Donner cut, I'm always confused as to why they're not in that scene type of thing. One of the most famous being, I think we brought this up the last time, is when he first comes to confront Zod and he goes, General, care to step outside? That's
Yeah, great
burned
line.
into my memory, but it's not in the Donner cut. It's the theatrical cut type of thing.
And it's weird that it isn't in the Donner cut, because it almost sounds like kind of a reaction to when Clark is talking to the bully in the diner when he says, excuse me, sir, do you care to step outside? And that was something that Donner shot. That was something that was in the original footage that Donner did before he was fired by the Salkins.
Yeah, and so it feels there's something thematical about it, but that which makes it weird that that's not what's used. In fact, the line that they end up using feels kind of strange, or he just randomly says, "You do not care about freedom of the press" or something like that.
Yeah, which, okay, that's kind of an appropriate thing for Superman to say. I guess like he is a journalist a large percentage of his time and his life, but like that's not as cool as General, would you care to step outside?
Well, not only that, there's a lot of sequences that happen a lot faster in the Donner cut.
Yeah.
Is the best way of putting it.
It's a
One
lot
is that
shorter. They shave off a lot of time.
yeah, one of them is that there's a much larger build up to Superman getting to Zod. Like it's him flying through the city, and you see like the wind blowing away random things, and so it adds to this like great sort of build up to like, hey, he comes to save the day type thing. Only for the Donner cut to just like it has 1 second, and then he's immediately upon them.
Well,
And there's one line that caught me off guard because it's clear they fast forward it, and I didn't understand it until now, seeing them back to back. There's a line that Clark says where he says, "I'm not a coward, Zod," and I didn't realize this until I watched both of them back to back, which is that it's clear that they fast forward it almost to make it go by quicker because he sounds like a chipmunk in the
right.
Donner cut.
No, I remember his voice sounds a little weird
It doesn't make
during
any
that
sense because it's
delivery.
the exact same sequence, but I don't know why whoever whoever did the editing on that audio made him a chipmunk, even though it's the exact same scene.
But that entire fight sequence, it is a lot quicker in the Donner cut. I would argue that Superman 2, it was like a big innovative movie for superhero movies. It was the first time they kind of took a modern approach to trying to do like comic book characters with these very elaborate superpowers having like a full-on fight, you know, like having Kryptonians battle each other in live action.
Yeah, it's the
And
first big supervillain fight of like cinema.
it's also the first superhero movie to have a bloated third act because it gets too obsessed with showing off the superpowers and the big action sequences. So
Yes.
that's a big complaint I have about a lot of the more modern superhero movies. They get they have like a big bloated climactic sequence that goes on for too long, in my opinion.
And the reason the Donner cut I think works better is that it lowers the bloat, especially for the fortress scene. Whereas because the fight itself, it has some differences. It's not a huge amount of them. One of the main differences is one of my favorite lines, which is the one where Ursa grabs him from the shoulder and she goes, "You would hit a woman," and he stops and then just immediately punches Nan right in the fucking face, which isn't in the Lester cut, which I thought was weird because that's more of a joke than in the other one. And there's an ADR line when he puts that giant steel thing on top of Nan.
Oh, he caged Nan, like spell it
Yeah,
out for the dumb
instead of
audience,
just
you
putting it
know.
on top of him, type of thing. And this movie's full of moments like that. One of my favorite one of my favorite instances of watching the difference between the Lester cut and the Donner cut is the use of different takes involving Luthor.
Mm-hmm.
One of them, of course, is the one in the White House when he first talks to Zod. Because there's a joke in the Donner cut that's not used in the Lester cut, which is when he mentions the son of Jor-El, and he keeps repeating himself. And Luthor's just like, I just said that. Like, why are you still like?
When Zod is like, Jor-El, our jailer, and then Lex is like no, Jor-El the baseball player. Like, who do you think I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's a really funny moment, and you're surprised. I'm surprised it's not in the Lester version, but it's in the Donner version. And then there's also a shit ton of 80-yard fake Lex Luthors in the in the Lester cut.
Oh yeah, because they couldn't get Gene Hackman to come back without Richard Donner. He said he wouldn't participate in any more stuff, so they had to get someone who could impersonate his voice for some of the Lex dialogue. That's
And
in
it's
the
a lot of
movie.
jokes. It's a lot of small jokes, especially in the fortress, because when they get to the fortress in the Donner cut, they just land and then that's it. Like they don't. Whereas in the Lester cut, they drop Lex randomly in a random part of the fortress, and so he has to climb down to where they are. And so it's a lot of fake Luthor climbing down something from the behind with like a really bad Lex Luthor impersonator.
Yeah, the one small or another small step for mankind or whatever he says.
Yeah, he has a bunch of like random lines. Like one of them's like, "Could you at least like drop me in the same state or some shit, something ridiculous?" And there's a lot of it, and it's really funny. It's almost really funny to catch what's a reshoot or not. I told you this before we started recording. The very first scene of the Lester cut made me burst out laughing because it's General Zod and them getting arrested for whatever their crime was. The reason I'm using quoting fingers is because it's obvious that it's a reshoot. Two, it's a really bad green screen, and three, it's clear all three of them don't want to be there.
But I'll say this about that opening sequence is I don't know if that's supposed to be like a guard in armor or like a Kryptonian robot or like whatever, like that dude in like the red suit that
I think he's supposed to be a guard because
yeah.
I watched the special edition recently for Superman 1 as well because I decided to do that because I finally went out and I bought a copy of it. And there's a guard that looks very similar to what ends up in that second one. So I think the idea is it's supposed to be very similar. It's like the texture is different, but it's the same type of like weird eyes on it. So I think it's supposed to be like a cop or something,
Right. Like they were using
whatever the thing was.
Using some of like the same designs that already worked on in the first movie. But it was something that I always kind of dismissed the theatrical cut of this movie after the Donner cut came out. I was like, okay, that's my preferred Superman 2. And in recent years, though, when Superman 2, the theatrical cut started popping up on streaming services, I went back and rewatched it, and it reminded me, like, okay, there are some little things in here, like the red guard. That's kind of cool looking. Some little details like that here. I don't really like the Paris terrorist thing, and I think that's kind of a weird way to get the Phantom Zone criminals back out of the Phantom Zone. But
it's also almost like a little, what's the word I'm looking for? Not racist per se, but almost prejudiced to the way French people are
yeah,
in it, because they're always just like, a lot of them are basically going ho ho whenever they talk, and
or
it's just like really funny.
most of their dialogue is just English and a French accent, and so like, why aren't y'all just speaking French to each other?
And yeah, and
like
not only
the
that,
French
Lois gets
police.
there like really late, like randomly, and she's just sort of yelling things at them. They're like, "Atom, like hydrogen bomb." Like, just the guy's like, I'm doing the press conference. They're all right in front of me. What are you doing over there? Like, come over here, type thing. Like, it's just weird, the whole sequence of events that happens with it. And then there's the movie treats audiences dumber as well, because there's a line that happens when Luthor goes to the fortress and he talks to the instead of a Marlon Brando hologram, it's the hologram of the mom, and she outright says, by the way, if there was, like, say, a hydrogen bomb or something that went off near it, yeah, it could probably break. It's like, why are you saying that? Why would you know that? Why would you also know what a hydrogen bomb is? Type of thing.
And I do remember, like, before the Donner cut came out, I remember like watching like the DVD commentary that had Richard Donner on the first movie, and him saying like, "Yeah, my original idea was that when Superman's dealing with the nukes at the end of this movie, one of them would get pushed into space, and the movie would end with it crashing into the Phantom Zone rectangle thing, freeing those criminals, and then it would be the tease for Superman 2, Superman versus General Zod." And I was thinking like, oh wow, Richard Donner was so ahead of the curve. He was already kind of thinking of like what today's superhero movies do, is like the post-credit tease for the next movie, like very like MCU style. Is like even Richard Donner was thinking of something like that back in the late 70s.
Well, my girlfriend brought this up as well, is that there's even something that happens at the end of the theatrical cut, which is that, how in a lot of MCU movies nowadays, it's like, so and so will return type things. There's a quick line in the credits. It's super fast. It's in the very beginning. It just says coming soon, Superman 3. Just
Right.
on it right away. And it's like, oh, that was ahead of the curve, just being like, oh, by the way, we're already making another one of these type of thing. So it's borderline saying Superman will return, ironically.
And the sad thing about that is that Richard Donner said that he had an idea for Superman 3 had he been able to finish Superman 2, and it was also successful. So I wonder what that would have been if they had been able to do like an ongoing series of Superman movies with Richard Donner in control.
I always think that a lot, because Richard Donner, especially with him having written a Superman comic, really proves to me that he understood Superman better than most people do. There's only some stuff about him that it's not really his fault necessarily, but like sometimes it's the writing's fault, which is the Clark Kent Superman dynamic. The movies tend to do a really bad job with that than everything else does. But outside of that, he did a really great job with the understanding of what made that character tick, what made him interesting to audiences, and what made for good drama.
The one thing I was gonna say though, but as much as I kind of don't like the Paris terrorist sequence, the one thing that I do love that came out of that is when that bomb goes off and frees those criminals in the Richard Lester version of the movie. I love like that old school animation of how all of that looks, and then when you compare that to like the Donner cut, it looks like, okay, that was done on someone's computer in 2006, and it has like a more of a kind of a modern feel to it. And I wish that they had done the Donner cut like just like 10 years later or something, because I feel like I know people now who could make this movie look like it was made in 1981, and like edit all that stuff back in.
That's the main issue with the Donner cut, is the fact that it's made in the mid 2000s, and it's used with the best way I can put it. It's used like an $100 program. Is the best way of putting it, because there's a lot of CGI, and I don't mean CGI. I mean like somebody clearly made it on their computer during that time frame where home CGI was still very lower than it is now, because CGI wasn't. I'm not going to pretend CGI was bad during that time. We've all seen Superman Returns, type of thing. Like that came out at the same time, and everything looks amazing. But there's a lot of moments in that where it's like you said, it's clearly made at in 2005, not designed to look like it was made then.
Right.
Especially because it's a lot of background uses, a lot of weird CGI backgrounds. For one, they become free instead of being like the way an old background would look during that time frame. And there's also some moments that also look kind of funny because of it. One of them is when the Washington Monument falls down, but it's clearly like three pieces falling forward because they're like three CGI.
Yeah, it doesn't
pieces.
look great.
Yeah.
That was another thing that they changed in the Richard Lester version. It was the Mount Rushmore that the Kryptonians deface, and then in the Donner version, it's the Washington Monument.
Yeah, and I remember him saying that was always the original idea, was the Washington Monument. Apparently, it doesn't. It makes the Mount Rushmore one still makes me laugh though, because it's just like it's the way they all three of them they change the three and then destroy Lincoln's face and fly off.
But when they were making the Donner cut, I think they were always saying that we kind of just think of this as like a big DVD extra. Like if we were going to actually make this movie with like a movie budget, it would it would look a little different. It wouldn't have had like another spin the Earth back in time to erase Lois's memory. They probably would have done something different. They didn't want to use the Richard Lester magic kiss that
No, which the magic kiss is a terrible ending even now. It was because that was the thing, because my girlfriend looked at me when he does it, and he goes, "Why would he be able to do that?" I'm like, I don't know. Like, that's just this movie. It's a dumb joke, or not joke. It's a dumb moment that happens in this movie. I showed her the Robot Chicken skit right after that made me laugh. That makes fun of that exact sequence. Have you ever seen that?
You've told me about it, but where he goes around kissing other people to make them forget their memories.
Yeah, it even makes fun of it too. It's like, now I'm going to kiss you to make you forget. And Lois just goes, "Why would that be one of your superpowers?" It's like, why would that be one of my superpowers? Look, you should hear yourself sometimes, Lois. It just makes me laugh because it's like, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Why would that be one of your superpowers?
But as dumb as that is, it also kind of it's just a shitty thing to do. Like it takes away all agency from Lois. Like she doesn't have like any consent involved in if she's gonna remember their fling, their relationship, whatever. So
Yeah, and as I mentioned, it makes Superman Returns a very gross film.
Superman Returns works better as a sequel to the Donner cut, I've decided, than as a sequel to the theatrical cut. Because at the sequel to the Donner cut, she does kind of have a little, or at the end of the Donner cut, I mean, she does have a little bit of like deja vu. Like she has that line, like, "Do you ever feel like there is something really important you were trying to remember and then you forgot it all of a sudden?" Something like that. She suggest something to Clark. So maybe she at some point would have some lingering memory of their relationship. Although I still don't know how the hell that would work with the time travel and all of that. But
That's the thing always confuses me about the time travel, is that when he does the time travel, he pretends like nothing else had happened, if that makes sense. Like, there's a lot of sequences, especially in the first one, because he does it and then immediately Lois is okay, but it doesn't make any sense it doesn't make sense from a time travel standpoint. You know what I mean? Because everything else would still be happening at that exact moment, but instead Clark just lands right there and then talks to her. Like, is the idea that there's another Superman running around taking care of things at the time and then disappears once everything's done? Like, that's the thing I never really understood.
yeah, the logic doesn't hold up in either movie, honestly. And it was kind of a last minute idea to even include it in Superman the movie. But the other thing about that is I can accept it a lot easier in Superman the movie, because it's like, okay, maybe if like that level of grief, the death of Lois, maybe that's what was able to like push him to fly back in time, but it's not something he can typically do on his own. Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut, makes it look like, oh, he can just kind of casually do this whenever. So.
Yeah, it's more poignant in the first one because of the line Marlon Brando has where he says, "You're forbidden from essentially rewriting history. Like, you're not allowed to mess with human history. It has to move, has to go on as if you weren't there. Like, you lead by example, but you don't do anything else. You're like, you don't like come down and do diplomatic things for people. You don't do any of those things. Like, you're just a guy who happens to be a fly on the wall type of situation. And then he just reverses time. And so it's like, okay, it's an extreme situation type thing. Whereas in the second one, it's like, and then he just does it. It's almost like I don't have time to deal with the rest of this, so I'm just gonna reverse time. But again, it doesn't make any sense in both cuts, because there are things that happen that don't make as much sense. Like, especially the bringing the flag back to the White House.
Right. Why would he need to do that then?
Exactly. It's like it's if they never attacked, why does he need to do that?
And also, the bully Rocky at the diner, he goes and beats this guy up for no reason. Like from he's like, dude, I've never seen you before in my life.
Exactly. Me and my girlfriend were making fun of that. He's like, in this timeline, he just shows up and beats up a guy for no reason. This guy has no idea what's happening. All he knows is he's eating his food. Somebody made fun of him, and then he got his ass beat. It's like it doesn't make any sense from that standpoint.
But I guess like it was
so
all
funny.
stuff that Donner shot, so I guess he just wanted to use that and was like, yeah, I know it doesn't make sense with the time travel, but that's just like that's the best we can do.
Yeah, he's said on interviews, as well as the introduction to the Donner cut, he's like, this is as close as we could get, because it's impossible. He can't just go back in time and make a new ending for it. Like, there's a lot of scenes throughout the Donner cut that is clearly something shot for the Donner cut, which is like, it's a body double of somebody. It's usually like a body double of Clark in some way, either from the back or from the sides, or if it's like, for instance, the chamber when he's getting his powers taken away. In the Donner cut, it's clearly a guy dressed as Superman standing inside of it, and they're trying not to like show his whole face because they know it's not Christopher Reeve. And then there's the shot of Lois typing stuff at the end of the movie. It's clearly a different woman.
Yeah, it's not Margot Kidder.
And so there's a lot of scenes like that. But let's talk more about the actual plot of this movie. This is the first of the superhero movies that does the hero doesn't have their powers scene.
Right. Yeah, it's also tapping into that like that Spider-Man with great power comes great responsibility thing, which pretty much every superhero at one point in their career, they go through this crisis where they're like, I should just quit being a hero and go just be a normal dude with a normal life.
They've all had it. Every single superhero movie I've seen at some point, outside of few of them, have had some moment of that. Whether it's one of the characters or the main character. Spider-Man has had it.
Yeah,
Batman has had it.
Spider-Man 2, Batman Forever. Yeah,
the X-Men has it with Rogue in the X-Men 3 movie. Even sometimes some of the stuff that Wolverine deals with. Deadpool has that issue in Deadpool 3. Like, there's a lot of movies have done this. The funniest thing is that I thought it lasted longer. When I was a kid, I thought it was like half the movie, but it's not. It's just that there's a lot of the movie where Clark just doesn't know what's happening. He's in his own world.
Yeah, he's distracted.
It doesn't occur to him anything's happening outside in the real world. Which is another thing that's really funny about the Donner series of movies, is that Superman's super hearing is useless. Because he doesn't ever like hear, like, when, like, for instance, in the first one, when Lois is in trouble, he walks out and he has no idea what the hell's happening. He looks up and goes, oh, I guess Lois is in trouble. Like, even though he's in the same building that they're in, he has no idea anything's happening to Lois. And then in this one, the entire world is under attack. He has zero idea any of this is happening. And this is even before he goes to the fortress. It's really funny because of that.
Yeah, and the super hearing, I guess, is kind of inconsistent for the other Kryptonians, because he's also talking fairly at like normal volume to Lex at the end about like his plan to use the molecule chamber. And,
yes, that's a great example of what I mean.
But speaking of the plot, we get like the love story with Lois, and we get like a glimpse of what maybe the two of them would look like together. uh, it doesn't last. They have to hit the reset button at the end of the movie. But the other neat thing that this film gave us is the supervillain team up between Lex Luthor and the Kryptonians, and that's something that a lot of superhero movies have done since then. You get like that scene where the two villains meet each other and make like an agreement to work together. We see that in the White House here, but a lot of superhero movies since then have recreated that.
Well, what it reminds me of the DNA of that part is when Riddler and Two Face first meet. The
Mm-hmm.
exact same type of situation where somebody shows up unannounced to somebody who clearly has all the power, type of situation, who's just like, "Why in God's name would I listen to you? I am fucking all powerful." And so with Lex Luthor and Zod, it's obvious because Lex is like, "I know things that you do not know." And he's like, "Well, how would you? Like, you're just some random ass dude who walked into my house expecting me to know who the fuck you are," type thing. Whereas Riddler Two Face does the very same thing with Riddler showing up, being like, "I'm here to help you with something that you don't know about," and he also has the same idea where like, "Why the fuck should I care?" And so you see the influences that this movie has on other movies once somebody meets somebody else of the villains, because especially when the power dynamic is so absolutely different type of thing. It's not like the way Sandman and Venom when they meet. Like the power dynamic is very similar to each other, whereas when, like I said, Riddler and Two Face meet, it's very much different, or even differences with the way Scarecrow and Ra's al Ghul probably, but we never saw them meet.
But Joker and Two Face in the Dark Knight, you get that hospital bed scene with
Actually, yeah,
Heath
no, that's
Ledger
really
and
good.
Aaron Eckhart.
And I'm a big fan of when villains are hostile towards each other, like the way the cartoons are too, where Luthor and Joker first meet each other. It's very similar to that too, where Joker shows up uninvited to talk about, "Hey, I'm going to help you kill Superman," to Lex Luthor, type thing. Like that sort of type of dynamic is very, very well done on this. The funniest thing is how often Zod threatens to kill Luthor, but Luthor never, just keeps trying to like keep himself ahead of the game, and it's really funny to watch.
Yeah, and I love whenever you can have that sense of like a supervillain community. That's like one of my favorite things in Marvel and DC comics is like, oh, like these guys know each other and like they've worked together and they have friends and then they have people they don't get along with and those types of relationships. And that's something that I feel like a lot of superhero movies haven't really been able they haven't had the opportunities to show off because most movies are about the rise and fall of a particular villain and they're just there to be the antagonist of that story and then they're defeated and we move on. But it's one thing that I'm hoping that we'll see more of with like the MCU and the new James Gunn DCU is that we'll have these types of interactions between different villains. But yeah, it all started here in Superman 2.
It's the one thing that I'm bummed out about the ending of Joss Whedon's Justice League. This Joss Whedon's Justice League's ending has
Oh,
Lex
Lex
being like,
and
"We should have
Deathstroke, yeah.
our own club," type of thing, which is like, "Oh, you wanted to do the Legion of Doom, and I would have, as much as I don't like the Snyderverse universe, I would have loved to have seen that."
Yeah. Well, hopefully we get it in a in a better shared universe in the near future.
Yeah, no, it's one can hope, and the and the differences between this version and the other version when it comes to their relationship isn't a lot. It really isn't that much different. But that's because it's purely because Gene Hackman didn't want to come back for reshoots. I guarantee you, if Gene Hackman wanted to do reshoots, we would have had a much different dynamic between those two, especially because of the way the third act plays out with Lex, where they randomly drop him off in a part of the fortress that isn't where they all are. Like, I think Richard Lester wanted to have a more playful relationship between the Kryptonians and Lex, but he couldn't do it because he couldn't bring back Gene Hackman, like, no matter what he did. And because even the relationship between Lois and Clark is much different in both versions. And like you said, there's the agency of Lois is much smaller in the Lester cut. For instance, the way she finds out he's Superman, she
I hate that. Yeah.
risks her life. She risks her life in the Niagara Falls, only for Clark to trip really fast and put his hand into fire and it's like, oh my god, you're Superman type of thing. So there's no like agency to her actually finding out he's Superman. Whereas in the Donner cut, she just outplays his ass like
Mm-hmm.
immediately, and it's
And
a
that's so
wonderful
much
moment.
more like it, like in the modern context of how Lois is treated with like so much respect in the comics now, and in a lot of the others, shows and movies and stuff. Like a great example is Superman and Lois. She's like just as much of a title character as he is, and that. But like the way that they show her so smart and clever and worthy of Superman in this movie with the secret identity stuff, where he's not an idiot either. Like at first it looks like, okay, Clark is pretty good at keeping the secret. He's able to handle her jumping out the window at the Daily Planet, able to save her secretly, and not blow his cover. And then when she pulls the gun out on him and tricks him into thinking he's actually been shot at, I love that reveal so much more than, oh, he just fell and his hand landed in the fire, but maybe he did it on purpose subconsciously. Yeah, that was always lame.
Yeah, it was very lame. It also doesn't add anything to Lois's character, and even the way the relationship works when they get to the fortress is also very strange because in the Lester cut, they don't sleep with each other until after he loses his powers. And then in the Donner cut, it's the exact opposite: is that they sleep together first, and then he loses his powers.
That's a key difference. That's important for like I think this is the reason why Kevin Smith had like that Mallrats theory of Superman can't have sex with Lois. She wouldn't survive it. I think this came from this movie. The Richard Lester cut kind of implies like in order for me to sleep with Lois, I must give up my powers.
Yeah, it makes it very strange because of the way it plays out. And it also makes his decision even more rash in the Richard Lester cut because the conversation he has between his mom, the conversation he has for Marlon Brando, are two very different conversations. The one he has with his mom is very much like is her being like, "Well, you just have to turn human now. Like if you want to live with her, you got to be a human being." Like there's no end of the discussion. There's no like talking about it. She's just like immediately like get in the goddamn fucking chamber is what she's saying. And he's like, okay, and he gets in the chamber, and then everything explodes. It's like it feels like an overreaction to what's going on for both sides. Whereas in the Marlon Brando sequence with Jor-El, Jor-El is like, okay, here's the deal. Like, if you want to be with her, that's fine, but like it stands to reason if you want it to really be a true relationship, then you probably have to be like them, type of thing. But he never like. But the only issue I've always had with both versions is that none of them have ever never no, none of them ever once go. By the way, you could probably try to do both. Like no one ever. None of them ever
Right.
think about it for like half a second. They both immediately go, well, if you want to stay with her, you probably should be a person, like a normal human being. So if you want, you can get in the chamber, but understand if you get into the chamber, you leave the entire world vulnerable. As you mentioned, it's the great power with great responsibility situation. Whereas Jor-El is very much like, I am imploring to you, don't do this. If you do it, I won't stop you, but for the love of God, you probably shouldn't do this type of thing. So it's much more, it becomes more of Clark's decision than the Richard Lester cut does, because the Richard Lester cut is more like is him listening to his mom type of thing. Whereas in this one, Donner's has a great relationship with Jor-El. And I love the way that Jor-El's hologram looks right at Lois,
That
going,
is so,
"You did this."
yeah. I mean, I don't know if that was what they were originally thinking in the 70s when they shot all this, or if it was just something that like when they were editing the Donner cut, they figured out like, oh yeah, we can make like Jor-El like stare at Lois like this. But yeah, that's such a cool moment. And that conversation with Clark, yeah, you get so much more out of that in the Donner version with Marlon Brando about he's trying to talk him out of it. He's trying to tell him like, like I get you want to be happy, but wouldn't you rather serve like a higher happiness and just be dedicated to this great mission that only you can do? And
Yeah,
like,
and it also sells him getting his powers back much better because because in the Richard Lester cut, he just gets his powers back, the end type of situation.
And he's in the fortress screaming for his father in that version, and that doesn't
Yes,
make any sense, really.
it really doesn't. And he also says mother randomly because I think that's an ADR line. And so he whereas in the Donner cut, Jor-El comes out and goes like, here's the deal, you know, I I figured you would, even though I told you there's no way back, I figured you would decide that what you did was wrong. So I put something in here that lets you get your powers back, but when you do, you lose all of, you know, the knowledge that this fortress had. There are repercussions to what Clark has done in the Richard Donner cut, whereas the Richard Lester cut's just like, you know what, no harm, no foul. You're Superman again, type of thing. Like I thought that was really interesting between the two.
And Christopher Reeve plays that grief so well when like, oh, I'm having to like lose a father again. You know, it's like he's able to really sell that in his act. It's the only time you feel like you have a scene of Christopher Reeve and Marlon Brando together.
Yeah, it's a great sequence because like he's like, I've lost so much because I made a rash decision. And my favorite thing is the fact that he realizes he fucked up pretty quickly. It's not even because that's the reason I thought it lasted longer. Because the way Spider-Man 2 is, it's like the entire second act of Spider-Man 2
Mhm.
that he basically doesn't have his powers. Whereas for some reason I thought it was the same thing at Superman 2, but it's only like what, a 10-minute time frame
Yeah,
of a
he
2-hour movie.
they just drive to the diner wherever that I don't know if that's supposed to be in Canada, if that's supposed to be in Alaska, if that's supposed to be in like Vermont. I don't know where that is, but
But yeah,
somewhere
he
up
just
north.
immediately gets his ass beat, and he's like, "Well," and I love when he does it. He's like, "Oh, I'm bleeding. I've never," like he immediately he's like, "I regret everything."
But Christopher Reeve is really good in that too. Like, you know, that vulnerability when he's like, "Oh wow, like I've never bled before. I've like being hit in the back of the head really hurts when you're just a normal human. I've never felt this kind of pain before."
Like he realizes that he can't fight injustice anymore, even at the lowest level, type of thing. So in his head, he's made a mistake immediately, even before Zod has happened at that exact moment, because he's like, "There's nothing I can do, even though my thought process hasn't changed."
I guess the parts of the movie that I kind of feel like haven't aged as well. It does at times feel like a bit of a relic of you know, a different era in superhero stories. Like the idea that he cannot be the hero and also be in a loving relationship with Lois. That's quite dated. You know, nowadays there's been so many fantastic Superman stories about their romance, about that relationship, which I think is a much more interesting to explore. So when I go back and watch Superman 2, I kind of have to remember that, okay, yeah, this was kind of a an older time when just the general rule of thumb was that, yeah, like superheroes have to maintain their secret identity at all costs, no matter what.
Yeah, this is as I mentioned before, my issue has always been that between the Clark and Superman relationship and the Donner films is it's a Silver Age view of their relationship.
Hmm.
It's the Silver Age view of Superman's relationship with Lois, which is like you said, it's secret identity at all costs. There's so many stories in the Silver Age where Clark goes to the most extreme extremes to keep his identity secret from anyone that's not his parents or his dog, type of thing. Whether it's like gaslighting Lois so hard that she might as well be like mentally unstable, type thing, or like or super ventriloquism being a thing at all to make very weird moments happen. I was explaining this to my girlfriend recently that super ventriloquism is a thing because she thought I was going fucking crazy and that I was making things up. And two, there was an issue that I saw a panel of because I don't even remember what the context was, is that I guess Clark couldn't talk, and so Lois is trying to have a conversation with him, and Crypto uses super ventriloquism to make Clark talk. Like that's the type of insane shit you would only see in the Silver Age, and that's the exact world these comics were when this movie was being made. So a lot of the times, a lot of people don't understand that, because I've talked to people a lot where they're like, "This is what you think of Superman." I'm like, "No, this is what the world, including DC, thought of Superman at the time, because this is how his relationship with Clark was. They were two separate people instead of being just one being. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and if you think about it that way, in the context when the story was being told originally, it's actually quite bold and somewhat even subversive. The way, like, oh well, what if we did kind of a a what if story of Lois finding out Clark's identity? And I guess like the comics had explored this kind of material before. There were a lot of the Julie Schwartz era, I think, is riddled with a lot of quote unquote imaginary stories that don't actually exist in canon. But I mean, I guess that's kind of what they're doing here, is like, we'll show what it would be like if Lois was in on the secret, but then at the end of the movie we'll have to reset things back to the status quo.
Yeah, it's a lot of the moments like that. And one of my favorite lines in both versions of the movie is when she's like, "It must be exhausting to be Clark all the time," and he's like, "Well, no, I love being Clark, even though I have to make a fool of myself. And if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have met you." And she just goes, "But you're the same person." Like the way she questions it, because she's like, "This is weird the way you're talking about yourself," type of situation. And it's something I feel like Donner probably would have explored more if he had been allowed to, because it feels like there's something deeper in there that's never fully explored. But I think it's purely because there's no footage to make that get explored.
Yeah. But there were a lot of little things that you could tell, like Donner had these ideas for stuff that would be in the movie that then Lester either ignored or like didn't get or didn't want to bother with, and it didn't come through as clearly. Like, what's her name? Ursa, the Kryptonian.
Yeah.
She's like obsessed with taking people's like patches and badges, and like it's like jewelry, it's like decoration. It's
Yeah.
which
It's one of my favorite parts of the movie.
I never really understood that, I don't think, watching the theatrical cut. But then, like in the Donner cut, she has like that line in the White House. Like, what a weird planet here, where she's looking at all these generals that are decorated with medals and stuff, and she's like, the men here wear the ribbons and the jewelry. But like she rips off the patches off of the astronauts and the cosmonaut that are up on the moon, and then the sheriff's deputy when they're in East Houston, Idaho. They
Yeah.
went to the wrong Houston.
Yeah, it's really funny what happens, and like we didn't even talk about the where they land, and that because there's the Lester cut lingers on them being there, as well as some jokes that happen in that with between the sheriff and the deputy before they even get to them.
And that was all Lester stuff. All the Idaho stuff, that was all Lester.
Yeah, and there's a lot of sequences which makes sense when you look at it. It's like, yes, this is very much a Lester sequence when they get into the bar, and she arm wrestles them, and there's a lot more telekinesis going on in the Lester cut.
Right, because they clearly like did not give a shit about what superpowers does Superman actually have in the comics. Like, as soon as Donner and his team were gone, they're like, okay, he can shoot out the famous cellophane S out of his chest to wrap up Non in. He can
They point at him in the third act, or they're like together, and they just like point at him, and yellow and like a white beam comes at him. Like just weird shit that you're like, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, his heat vision makes that brick wall or whatever was thrown at him explode when they're having the big city fight.
There's a lot of weird shit that happens that's clearly like Lester just being like, who the fuck cares type of situation.
I mean, to be fair, the comics have done like a lot of weird stuff. Like when Superman would shoot a smaller Superman out of his hand, and
a lot of people think that a lot of people think you're joking, probably, but that's a real thing that happens.
Yeah. So I guess I can kind of understand people who maybe like they didn't really get that there's there's specific superpowers we've all agreed he has, and we should probably just stick with those.
Yes, exactly. And it's the reason why I mentioned the third act where they cut down the bloat, because the Donner cut makes the third act much more dramatic. It's more of a sequence of like they show up, Superman is like, he's at a loss. He's like, I don't have anything. I'm not any stronger. I don't have anything specific. He's like, I could beat you guys up. I can try to beat you guys up, but you have Lois by the throat. He's like, they're constantly threatening to kill her. So there's no fight in the third act. they just show up and threaten him as hard as they can. He's like, okay, sure. Like he's like, I have to come up with something. Like he has a plan clearly, but he doesn't want to show that he does. Whereas in the Lester cut, they're like, well, he's gonna have a fight. He's gonna pull out a cellophane S and hit on with it, and they're gonna shoot at each other with psychic beams or something.
He has the holograms. He has like the
hide and seek
Superman
holograms.
decoys.
Like it's a whole series of challenges that eventually he's like, okay, none of these worked, so now this is what's going to happen. But it makes it very weird. It makes for a very strange third act because of it.
Yeah, and I feel like in the Donner cut, the Kryptonians are much more ominous and scary. Like the moon stuff, the sequence on the moon, for some reason, it just seems more deadly and serious in the Donner cut. Or like when they attack the White House, there's that cool shot of Zod. He picks up a machine gun and he starts shooting it for a little bit. And at first he's kind of like, this is cool. But then he gets bored of it quickly. That's only in the Donner cut, and that's such like a cool Zod moment because the whole story from Zod's perspective is he's kind of bored. Like he conquers Earth immediately, and then he's like bored in the White House until like he hears there's this Superman who would not bow to him, who would challenge him.
It's something I never thought about until I watched it as an adult, which is the idea that Zod is bored the whole movie up until a certain point. Like Zod's like he shows up on Earth, or not even Earth. He shows up on the moon. He's like, these guys are just kind of lame. Like these little primitive beings that we can literally just toss around and murder in seconds. He's like, there's nothing here. And so when he gets to Houston, or when he gets to Earth and he meets the sheriff deputy and they pull out a gun, he's like, ooh, a gun. Like it's the first time he shows any type of interest in anything. He gets the gun, shoots himself, and he realizes it does nothing. And he's like, well, that's lame. And then he gets back to being bored again. And then when they win against the military, he goes, I win. He's like, I always win. Like he immediately gets bored again. He's like, what is this? He's like, what is the point of any of this? He's like, I'm ruling over insects. This is bullshit.
Yeah, that's what makes it so sweet for him when he learns that, like, oh, the Superman y'all are talking about, that is the son of our jailer, Jor-El, like the guy who I swore one day he would bow down to me, and so would his heir. Like, fuck yeah, let's go.
Yeah, it's the first time he gets excited the whole movie, and it makes more sense in the Donner cut why he keeps repeating it, because he's like, are you sure? Like, this is something that's legitimately interesting for once is happening to me.
Yeah.
Because I'm so excited.
Reveal, yeah. like in the theatrical cut, he's just like, son of Jor-El, cool, revenge. And then like, yeah, but like in the Donner cut, it's more of a oh wait, slow down. Can you repeat that? Like
yeah, he's like he doesn't believe Luthor. He's like, you're fucking with me, right? Like it's like nothing else here has mattered at all. Like I showed up, I won. Like we're hanging out in here. Like he looks so bored the whole time he's there. He's like, they bowed down to me already. He's like, I don't know what else to do. It's the look of somebody who's like, I never thought I was going to get this far type of guy.
How do you feel about Terence Stamp as Zod? Like overall performance though, like
to this day, I still think he's amazing because even when his Zod is like a bored type of guy, he's menacing, not because he's yelling at everybody, because he's just so nonchalant about it. It's the same thing I said about Luthor, which is that he's not really an angry guy in the beginning when it comes to when he's first on Earth. But when he's angry, the sheer emotion Terence Stamp shows is so well done. I never realized how well done it was until fairly recently. There's the sequence, I didn't bring it up the last time, where when the Phantom Zone is coming to get the three of them, Terence Stamp has such fear in his face, and he's like twitching because he's like, it's fucking coming, it's gonna get me, and then there's nothing I can do about it, type of situation. And he conveys so much without doing anything. And so him being on Earth and then him finally getting excited, that's when he really starts yelling out things again. He starts getting more upset about stuff. He has more of his emotions coming out because he's like, I'm fucking here. This is the guy who's the son of the man who ruined my life. I'm going to make this work. And so he has all these great moments because of it. And then even when he finds out that Superman cares about people, he's just like, the way he says it, he's so like incredulous. He's like, I don't understand. Like, he cares about these things. Like, I can murder them in seconds, and he just cares about them. That doesn't make any sense to me. And it's a great moment. Like everything about Zod is so perfect, in my opinion, to what he's supposed to be, and even to what Zod is. It's like you understand from everybody why this version of Zod is the reason why Zod is the way he is from here on out.
Yeah, like Meal Before Zod wasn't a thing before this movie, right? Like that was like that iconic line came from this movie.
Not really. He was just some crazy Kryptonian. He had a weird general's outfit. That was the other thing. He always had a general's outfit. It's a general cap, this like sort of outfit that looked almost the way a general would have type
Yeah,
thing.
it's kind of an M. Bison type looking dude.
Actually, that's exactly what it is. M. Bison. Zod looked just like M.
Yeah.
Bison, except he was bald. He was also a bald guy, and he had no facial hair either. And then the second this movie happened, goatee all day, every day.
Yeah, he's got to have a beard now. So definitely was the best thing that ever happened to Zod as far as being relevant in the pop culture. But I totally agree with you about like Terence Stamp, the way that like he'll be kind of cool and not like super like angry, but then like he has like those moments of explosive anger. It's like when the president kneels before him and says, "Oh God," and then he corrects him. He's like, "No, Zod." Like,
Yeah.
let's get it right now. You know, that's my name. That's how you say it. Or when he says, "Oh, we'll get Superman next time," and Lex is like, "Next time? What do you mean next time? You're thinking so smart." And Lex is being real critical, and Zod is just standing there like, "Why would you act like this? Why would you say these things when you know I would kill you for it?" Like he's like generally confused.
Yeah, he's like it's this great sense that Zod is always like in control, and he's not. He's like, I don't understand. It's so funny. It's so great. And then not his relationship with the other two is also very interesting, especially Non, because Non is just this. He's a big dumb brute, and
in the
it's just so
theatrical
funny.
cut, I don't know if I realized this before, but the theatrical cut, they give him like those weird like grunts, and he makes like a bunch of like animal noises. And the Donner cut, they get rid of almost all of that. He's just a quiet dude. He's not like an animal in the
Here's the
Donner
thing.
cut.
I actually really like the animal noises that Non does. Like I remember being kind of bummed that he doesn't do that like weird like growl gorilla type growl, whatever he does when he's about to fly off and then falls straight down. There's something really funny about that. Unless the Lester cut makes him a comedic relief character.
Yeah, he's real
Well.
dumb. Like he's like they show off his stupidity a lot more in the Lester cut.
Yeah, like him trying to use heat vision for the first time, it just goes and like just always stops like midway because he can't figure it out.
This is the first movie that in the series that gave us heat vision. They never show heat vision in Superman the movie, right? It's not until
I don't remember. Yeah,
I
that's a
think
good point. I don't think he does.
When Ursa heat visions the snake, that's the first time that they show that.
I'm trying to remember if he does. I generally can't remember if he did in the first one. He uses a lot of freeze breath, I think, in the first one, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I think that was another change they did here. I think in the theatrical cut, Non has the super breath on the flamethrower, but then in the Donner cut, but it looks way better in the Donner cut.
Yes, and there's also a lot more stunts that they keep in the Lester cut during that sequence than in the Donner cut. Also, hats off to the three actors who are standing when the explosions are happening in that sequence, because they have to pretend like nothing's hurting them. So they just stand there like with these literal explosions going on around them. And so the actress for Ursa has to stand there and pretend like nothing, like she's not dangerously close to exploding.
Yeah, so they did a good job. Those three actors, Sarah Douglas as Ursa, Jack O'Halloran as Non, and Terence Stamp as Zod. Apparently, they wouldn't interact with the rest of the cast. Like when they were working together, they would always stay in their own little clique together, like isolated from everyone else. So it kind of helped them, have like that more alien, less friendly interactions when they were on camera.
Yeah. So the thing I want to talk about Jack O'Halloran really bad, real quick. So for people who don't know, Jack O'Halloran, who plays Non, outside of filming, he was like nice to everyone because he felt he was just happy to be there, type of thing. But the reason why Jack O'Halloran is as interesting as he is because he had direct ties to organized crime even while he was making this film, type of situation. And so there's a lot of stories about, in fact, he talks about it himself all the time. Like I was listening to something, it was an old How Did This Get Made? I think it's about either Superman 3 or Superman 4, where somehow they got Jack O'Halloran to show up because he was doing something nearby. And they were asking him about it. And he talks about how much respect he had for Christopher Reeve when he made the film, because Christopher Reeve was like mid-20s when all of this was going on. But yeah, the reason I bring it up is because of the most famous story that ever happened between him and Jack, which is that Christopher Reeve got kind of got a big head after a while because he's like, I'm Superman, everybody loves me, type of thing. And he started acting kind of like a jerk to people at some point until he rubbed Jack O'Halloran the wrong way in a way that pissed him off so much that he grabbed Christopher Reeve by the throat, pushed him against the wall, and lifted him up.
There's a lot of stories like that about the guy that like
it was crazy. And then he just looks at Christopher Reeve and he's like, look, I know you're the big guy, the big star here, but I will fuck you the fuck up.
I guess
from then on, apparently Christopher Reeve was the nicest human being.
There was one day that they were shooting, and I guess like he wasn't like out on set yet. Jack O'Halloran wasn't, and so I guess I think it was Terence Stamp who yelled something like, "Jack, you bastard, get out of here now!" And he just kind of like slowly like walked out there, and everyone was just quiet, like staring at him, towering over Terence Stamp, and he just slowly said like, "Don't ever do that again."
Yeah, Jack O'Halloran took had no fucks to give for good reason, type of thing. But he's always been very straightforward about it. He's written a book, I think, about it too at some point.
Yeah, still alive. I just looked it up. He's still alive at age 82.
He goes to conventions all the time. I would love to meet him one of the days. I had the chance to meet him one time, but I think he wasn't there at the time. But he is one of the big, prolific actors who likes talking about what happened during that time frame, because a lot of the other actors they'll sometimes talk about it, but they usually don't talk about that often. But with him, he's like, yeah, I'll tell you fucking everything. Like, I loved working on this movie and I love being part of like cinema history, even if he didn't really have any lines. But he does so much with his face in these movies that like I wish people understood how great he is in these movies because of them.
He also had a career as a professional boxer before he went into acting. So
yes, he is a very generally super fascinating human being, and I'm so happy he got to do these movies.
Well, you have any other thoughts on Superman 2 before we wrap up?
I will say this: the difference between Ken Thorne and John Williams is so obvious when you watch both versions. I was talking because I was listening because there's the montage in the beginning of the second one that I immediately went, that's not John Williams. Like the second the movie started, that was my first thought. That is not John Williams. There's something very different about this. And I don't mean bad. I mean like it's just not the same type of feeling when you're listening to it. And it's obvious once you watch the Donner cut because they got John Williams to come back to do it. And it's perfect. Everything else works out perfectly. I won't say that Ken Thorne did a bad job, but I think he did a very good job for the most part of what he could do. I still think Richard Lester's cut has a lot going for it. I'm not going to pretend it's a bad movie because it's not a bad movie. There's a reason why Superman 2 was considered one of the best superhero movies of all time
for a long time.
For a very long time.
Like back in the 90s, this movie had so much respect. Like it used to be pretty standard. If you ask someone what was their favorite superhero movie, a lot of people would say Superman 2.
I said that for years until Spider-Man 2 came out.
Yeah, but it used to be like the big three. It felt like you had X-Men 2, Spider-Man 2, and Superman 2 were like the big ones.
Those were the ones because people used to be like, sequels are always bad, and you would always bring up those three movies. Where like those are the movies that proved that superhero movies could be elevated from their first one once you get all the backstory out of the way. Because then you can do whatever you want from then on without having to do a lot of setup. And so those movies, honestly, to this day, I still think Spider-Man 2 and Superman 2 are amazing. X-Men 2 has aged a little badly, a little more poorly since then. But that's more because we've gotten better X-Men type related stuff since then. But in my opinion, that old adage of the sequels can still be just as good, if not better than the first one, still is a thing. Captain America: Winter Soldier proved that in a lot of great ways. It's just that it's really up to the writing team and the directing team what ends up happening, and also executives. I'm not going to pretend that executives don't have that power too, because without the executives, Richard Donner would have never have gotten his version out there, and if it wasn't for him, this version probably wouldn't exist too. It's very interesting, just what can happen just based on the whims of an executive.
And I've heard that there is like a fan film version out there that combines some elements from both of these, and also like has some of its own CGI, which I've heard looks better. So I might have to track that down and give that a watch sometime. But yeah, I still have a tremendous amount of respect for Superman 2, even the Lester cut, which I think still stands on the shoulders of Richard Donner's work. So I think it's still fair to give him credit for anyone who enjoyed Superman 2 over the years. Just I think that it was a good superhero movie for 1981. It's not really I feel like you can't show it to someone today, to a modern audience, and not give them like a disclaimer of like, okay, this was made like in a different time.
Yeah, that's the only issue the movies have started running into more and more, is the world. Not only has the world changed, but the world of superheroes and even Superman has changed.
Mm-hmm.
Because even when you look at 1989's Batman and onwards, a lot of those movies don't even reflect Batman then, sometimes, type of thing. So which is why it makes it so much more interesting than the way Superman was and his movies.
Yeah, and hopefully this changes in a few weeks on July 11th, but we've never really gotten a theatrical representation of the character's potential. Who can exist in this superhero universe and have the wide variety of fantastical stories you can get away with in the comics.
Yes, and I've never. They always the only thing that always bothers me about Superman is it always comes back to either Lex or Zod, and I want them to be able to branch out of those two characters. Because as much as I like Superman 1 and 2, as much as I like Man of Steel up to a point, I want to see more characters. It's the one thing I'll give Batman v Superman is that Doomsday shows up, even though he's a terrible looking Doomsday. Don't get me wrong, but at least it's another character that
It
isn't
is
those.
true. It was not Lex or Zod, but Superman
Although
3.
ironically, it's technically both.
Yeah, that's also true. Yeah, Doomsday by the way of Lex and Zod, but Superman 3 has neither Lex nor Zod in it.
It's clear it was supposed to be a Brainiac story.
Yeah, there's definitely shades of Brainiac, and even like shades of like modern day corporate, billionaire Lex. But that'll be an interesting movie to discuss soon, is Superman 3, as we approach James Gunn's Superman. But yeah, that'll be the next one of these Christopher Reeve movies we talk about.
Yep.
But otherwise, anything else Superman related you want to mention before we sign off?
The one last thing I'll mention is if you guys like the storyline that is Superman 2, there's two things you can check out. One, of course, is Last Son of Krypton, or which is the title they give it now. It used to just be called Last Son, which was a storyline during the Jeff Johns time frame, where Superman has to deal with General Zod. That was also written by Richard Donner. It's a great story. It also sets up everything that happens with New Krypton that happens in the storyline directly after that. So it's super wonderful, especially if you like Richard Donner. The other thing I will mention is the Superman animated series two-parter called Blast from the Past, which is their kind of version of the story where the two Kryptonians, instead of three, there's two, are released from the Phantom Zone, and Superman has to deal with them. So I would say go ahead and give those a watch, because those, I think, hold up very well as well. Even though they're not any of the three characters, they had to use three. I don't think they were allowed to use the three. So
Right.
it's Jack, Sor, and Mala instead of Zod, Phil, Ursa, and Non. So yeah.
Yeah, it was that weird time in the 90s when for some reason Zod wasn't allowed to exist, but
This is very weird. It's a very weird time frame, but yeah, that's the only time they're allowed to mention any other Kryptonians.
Yeah, I like those. I like the Last Sun story arc, that Jeff Johns run. I flat out love, and that was the first arc, I guess, in that, like, after 3-2-1 action, then it was Last Sun, and then on into New Krypton. So definitely recommend that too. But next time we will be talking about Superman 3 starring Richard Pryor.
I like to call it the Richard Pryor movie guest starring Superman.
But it also has Annette O'Toole, who will go on to be Martha Kent in Smallville. We should say that Terence Stamp returns from Superman 2 to be Jor-El, the voice of Jor-El.
That is one of the funniest things about that, is the fact that he went from being a man who hates Jor-El to being Jor-El as a voice. There's one other one that I want to bring up, but it's not even, it's a quick thing because it's a funny joke. A long time ago, Ashton Kutcher was in a movie with Terence Stamp, where Terence Stamp was his boss, and it was a romance comedy where he tries to date Terence Stamp's daughter. There's a deleted scene in the movie, or not deleted scene because it's a blooper. There's a blooper in the movie where he's trying to like win the daughter back or something by talking shit about her dad, and he goes, "Your dad's crazy. He tried to kill Superman." And so it just shows how much that Terence Stamp is very much known for that character, even for the people who work with him, and I think that's really funny.
I mean, if you think that's bad, he also gets impeached by Queen Amidala in The Phantom Menace. So
that's true.
Very interesting career of Terence Stamp. But yeah, we'll be talking about Richard Pryor next. So, but until next time, as always, keep it super.